Welcome to the Lifetime at Work podcast, episode number 9, the podcast about careers, life, and business. We spend so much of our lives at work, how do we make the time count? If you're curious about other jobs, maybe considering a life or a career change, or maybe you have a dream of working for yourself one day and owning your own business, this is the podcast for you. My name is Greg Martin, and I'm a small business owner, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of a food business called Farmer Prepared Meals. Every week, I talk to guests from the business world about the happiness and meaning they get from their jobs. The goal is to help you build more meaning, more purpose, and more fulfillment into your work. And in this episode, I am talking to a designer. She has been in the industry for a number of years, and it's kind of about the cutthroat world of interior design. That's kind of what the episode is called and all about. So I had no idea, but I learned a lot about the world of design in this episode. So let's get that intro music going and we'll talk about it. If you're a fan of the podcast, you can check out the website lifetimeatwork.com and follow all the episodes, see the past ones, see what platforms I'm on, all that great stuff. I also wanted to introduce our sponsor this week, which is Farmer Prepared Meals. It is the prepared meal company that I own, and we have a new website, and we're delivering all across the Greater Toronto area. So if you are tired of cooking like everyone else and you want a great meal that is incredibly easy, we deliver them, and you just have to heat them up and eat. They're so easy. Go to farmr.ca. You can order there. You can find out what we're up to. The chefs are always making up some great new stuff, and it's really just a great service that is just getting better and better. In this week's episode, I am talking with Dyonne Fashina, and she is a designer. She's an interior designer, and she was laid off a couple times, and I could really relate to that when I started talking to her because I was laid off too. And in this episode, we talk about that. She was laid off twice, and this young, excited student to get into the interior design industry and work with a company. It was all super exciting and great. And then she got laid off and got another job and then got laid off again. And so we talk a little bit about at the beginning about the world of design, and you kind of get that. But I think the big takeaway in this is, what do you do when you get laid off? And how do you reconcile this thing that you've always wanted? I mean, Dyonne talks about it, that even as a kid, she just all she wanted to do was be a designer, and so she got into the industry and worked really hard and still got laid off. And that's kind of the cutthroat world out there that we're living in, and especially of design, where that just happens. Projects end, and you end up in situations where you may not be able to have any more work anymore. And you know what, investment banking, what I did when I got out of school, was sort of the same thing. Not that I wanted to knew that forever that I wanted to be that, but it was totally this, hey, you never know if you're gonna have a job, so make sure you just work really hard, and hopefully you do. And no matter what happens, and no matter how good you are, your time can always come. And sometimes, in Dyonne's case, and I think in my case too, the layoff actually ended up being a good thing. It ended up kind of working out, where it almost gave you this push and forced you to do something that you otherwise wouldn't have. You would just have ended up in some job that you maybe didn't love, or weren't in the right place, or that had too much politics, but it was the safe choice and the easy choice. And being laid off sort of pushed you into doing it. And I think Dyonne has that in her. And I think it really helped me a lot too, being laid off. There was the severance, and there was the time off to reflect, and there was just that push, I guess, that made me think about other things and the rest of the world out there to want to do. And so that is the coolest thing I think about this interview, because we talk a ton about being laid off and just what it feels like and the experience that we both had. So I hope you enjoy this interview with Dyonne Fashina. Well, Dyonne, thank you for joining me on the Lifetime at Work podcast.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So I wanted to, you're in the design industry, one that I do not know much about, and that's why you're here to teach me everything that there is. And I thought maybe the best place to start would probably be talking about your company and sort of what you do, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So I am a interior designer, and I started my business, Denizens of Design, about 6 years ago. And we focus primarily on hospitality design, which obviously in the current climate of COVID-19 world has been a heavily hit industry. And it's been an interesting challenge navigating that. And I'm sure we'll talk about that more. But yeah, I had a passion for hospitality and commercial design spaces my entire career. And I've dived into all sectors of design, from residential, retail, even a little bit of healthcare. So I've got a well-rounded design experience as far as the industry goes. And I'm sure we'll touch on the reason why I started my business later on. I think it ties into some of the things that the reason why I'm here to talk about my business. But yeah, it's been a really rewarding process to own my own business and really forge my own path in terms of the design industry.
Yeah, and so did you? I guess you sort of mentioned that you sort of had a passion for more for kind of the hospitality industry, which is why you chose it. Was it is it a highly competitive, or how does the I'm intrigued by sort of the landscape of the design work. Kind of what are there's obviously the residential stuff, which what are sort of the different options, or what are the other, sort of the main types of design that you could focus on or have an expertise in?
I mean, it's very wide
Yeah.
ranging. And I would say that, yes, it's competitive in terms of the industry. There are a lot of people that are also passionate about hospitality, but there are a lot of people that are passionate about residential design. There are people that are passionate about retail design, healthcare design. So those sectors all have their sort of main competitors, and truly, I just view them as colleagues. Like, we're
Yeah.
all out here doing our best work, and we all have our sort of individual skill sets and sort of what we're known for and what our clients come to us for. So, it's, as much as they are essentially competition, they're also people that we sort of lean on, especially in times like this. Yeah, it's definitely.
Yeah. So I guess someone would get you involved probably, I guess, I imagine right at the beginning, early stages of when they have an idea of, hey, I want to design this, yeah, entire hotel or this room or this whatever. How how do you pitch them? What is the how do you decide on a designer to to work on your project for you?
Well, it varies across the board, whether you're working with a private client, like a small business owner who has one restaurant versus a larger scale hospitality group that has multiples, or a sort of one-off boutique hotel versus a bigger conglomerate that has multiple hotels all across the world. Um, there are different processes. So in the commercial space of design, you're going to see what we call the RFP process, request for proposal, and they might interview and request sort of a fee proposal and an idea of what the business is from several designers, and then based on that, seeing where you're aligned, who's the best fit. Maybe it comes down to cost or design sensibility, whatever it may be, and then make that selection. A lot of the times in the case of our business, it's really a lot about word of mouth, who you know, getting yourself out there and meeting people, networking. That's where I'm finding most of my clients.
Yeah.
I started the business after being laid off from a architecture firm that I'd worked for 4 years. And I didn't really know what was next for me. I hadn't ever thought that I was going to start a business. But I just started, traveling, taking courses in graphic design, just sort of feeling my way through what does the industry mean to me? Do I want to stay within this industry? Am I meant to be within this industry? All these things I'm sure we'll talk about more. But I actually had 3 colleagues reach out to me and just say, hey, do you ever do side projects? Some didn't even know I'd been laid off. Others did, and were like, hey, now that you're out here on your own, we'd love for you to do this project for us. So I was very fortunate to have those 3 colleagues and friends come forward to sort of support me and bring this business to fruition. But you know, it's a little bit luck and a little bit of just having always shown my work ethic to those people, and when their project came about, I was the first to come to mind.
Yeah, like I guess part of it is when you start something and you're trying to start something on your own and new. I mean, it's scary. I've been there, and you're trying to do something, and as good of an idea as it is, it's kind of nothing if you don't have a client to start with. But at least when you start with one, and you can build a portfolio, and I think you end up also in that industry where you say, okay, well, rather than go and try to do something completely different, I might as well almost build up a bit of an expertise in this sort of area so that I can, again, build a portfolio that has a story and a meaning and all that sort of stuff. And I think when I went to your sort of website and saw the story, I think, there's obviously a bunch of really cool pictures of some of the places that you've designed, which is helpful. But then when you get into the story of you and the company, you sort of get into that. You get into how you were laid off and then found this path of come up with a new company that would be a bit different than some of the others. Do you mind talking about that and how you sort of see yourself as and what you've sort of created here as being a bit different than maybe some of the other traditional design firms out there?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for those that are going to check the website out after listening to this, you can see that video, and it's sort of
It's a
vague.
very cool video. I immediately asked you who did that video, and and I was like, if I ever need one like that, I would like to call this person. So yes.
Well, let's plug her now. Kelsey Blake. She has a company called Found Her Productions. So if anyone is interested in getting something like that made, she does a wonderful job. Um, but yeah, she actually approached me at the time. She was just trying to start a business, and wanted to tell the story of different makers and of different business owners. And I said to her, I'd love to do it. I want to tell the true story, a real story, not just the sort of glazed over, oh, I just started a business and look at how great it is. It's like, it was born out of something that could have been received as a negative, being laid off. A lot of people, especially if you haven't been laid off before, which I had been laid off from a previous position. So
Yeah.
I was already accustomed to what a layoff meant. And had gone through that process. But for others that if it's their first time, just sort of the emotional toll, the sort of wondering what's next, wondering if you're even capable, and what are the reasons for your layoff, those all play into your next steps. And I think for me, after that second layoff, just thinking, there were some great things that I learned across my entire career working for others. But there were some things that I always felt were missing. And I think that's what I sort of vaguely touch on in this video, of the idea of doing something different in a new way. And what that truly is to create a business that is focused on passion and not just the monetary returns, and bringing people together as a collective, as opposed to so the way that our structure works is that I run the business, and I have a network and a team of collaborators that I pull on. So they are not like permanent staff. And what that allows us to do is the flexibility to build a team on a per project basis.
Right.
So each client is unique. Each project is unique. And sometimes you'd find working for a bigger corporation that, okay, we have this project, we need people on it, who's available, as opposed to who's right for this job. So that's
Right.
what I'm talking about when I'm talking about something different. It's, everyone's invested. Every subcontractor that comes in is available and interested in the job. And if they're not, then they aren't put on that project.
Right. And I've done a lot of client work in the past, completely different industry, but that totally happens where you have your resources as the company dedicated to your good resources, I should say, or your best people, I would say, whoever you consider the best people. And they have to serve the clients that you really value the most, right? So typically those are the big corporates, the ones that are paying the most money. Again, depending on what your industry is, but it's going to be challenging for you to say, no, 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 we have this brand new client. They're really small. They're just starting out. Like, let's put our best people on. Like, never happens, right? You typically are going to say, okay, this person's not busy, and maybe there's a reason for it, or maybe there's not, or maybe it's just it is not the right fit for the project, and but you sort of staff it the way you do because it's a matter of availability and there's a timeline and all that. So yeah, it's the first time you said it, I didn't sort of click, but now it's just sort of clicking and saying, yeah, that does actually make more sense because for you, I imagine, do you have sort of a certain skill set yourself that you're like, hey, I'm really good at this, but you also have an appreciation for what you're not good at and go and hire someone for a particular job because they are good at something? Is that kind of how you do it?
100%.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm always saying to clients. And I think it's why they come back. I say, I know when I don't know. And that's the biggest mistakes people make is, just trying to figure something out that they're maybe not qualified to do. And then it ends badly. Instead of doing that, I take a step back and say, okay, here's where I need to pull in a resource because this is not something I've done before, or it's not something I should be doing as an interior designer. Maybe it's more architectural scope. Maybe it's more structural, electrical engineer, mechanical, all those counterparts, or even within just the design realm. Maybe it's, a really high-end hotel that wants pristine renderings and anyone from our team can't fit that bill, then outsource that to someone who specializes in rendering. All like those are the types of things that lots of big companies are already doing, but they're doing it just only for certain things, whereas Denizens as a company is doing that for more than just your typical engineers, architects, renderers. It's like, okay, this person is really skilled in retail design and let's put them on this project because they have a knowledge and the background in that our focus is really mostly hospitality. And even though I have a background where I did do retail for a little bit, it's definitely something that I would pull my resources to ensure that the project is done correctly, because it's not something that I could say, I'm going to lead this entirely on my own without having someone who's got that skill set backing me up as well.
So are all the people that you end up hiring and partnering with, are they typically like individuals, or would they often work with firms with multiple kind of people?
It's a mix.
Yeah.
So it's a mix of freelancers, people with small companies, and even larger companies. It just
Gotcha.
depends on the project.
Okay.
But definitely it's a mix. And yeah, so far so good. The one thing that people often say is, you need to scale your business. You need to have more employees. You need to do this. You need to do that. And what COVID-19 taught us all is that, whoa, man, not having all those things was really beneficial to weathering this storm. I can't even imagine what some of the bigger companies are going through and how they had to pivot like that. We were able to just sort of take a step back, breathe, and wait it out
Right.
until things picked up again, as opposed to panicking and having all these mouths to feed. Everyone is sort of managing for themselves while we see how things go. So
in a traditional then like bigger design firm, you would have people, it would be made up of people of a bunch of different sort of skill sets, I imagine, like you mentioned. And is the need, because you said you were laid off twice, I imagine that this isn't a unique thing, you just picked the wrong firms. It probably happens in this industry often. Is that kind of true? And is it because you'll have one big project and need to staff up, and then, or one big client, and then all of a sudden that's gone and you don't need them anymore? Or what kind of, how does that work?
yeah, so the first layoff was from a big company that locally, so I'm based in Toronto, locally had about 250 people, and worldwide had 10,000. So
Right.
it's very, very typical for companies like that to take on a lot of work because you're trying to feed 10,000 people. And
Yeah.
sometimes they would pull from other offices if one office wasn't busy in order to keep those employees, employed. But at a certain point, they would take on these large projects and then kind of forget to keep taking them on. And then as soon as those are over, it's like, oh crap, we have all these extra people. What do we do with them? Okay, temporary layoff, which was what happened to me. And while I waited, I just looked for another job.
Right.
There was no point in waiting it out. And in that case, I was a newbie. I was a junior designer. I was the most recent hire, and if they did go to permanent layoff, my severance would have been really low. And that was basically how it was explained to me.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it is common, unfortunately. And I think the model that I've created with Denizens is something that counters that. It's like, I don't have permanent staff, so I don't have to worry about laying them off. And the people that I work with are all sort of fending for themselves, and they're happy to work on the projects, and it's their responsibility to get other work to fill in the gaps.
Right. And there's accountability too as well, where if they're not performing, then you're less likely to work on the next job with them, or if it's just not in their skill set, or whatever it may be, it's less likely that they're going to be the first ones that you call the next time. But I imagine then through doing a few different projects, and you start to learn, hey, these people or this group are really good at such and such, so I want them on my project. Because then for you, I imagine it's a headache if the person's not good, because the client's going to come to you and say, hey, I thought you said this was the person we need to hire for such and such, and they're always behind, and they're always done, I hate this, or whatever it might be, right? So it comes down to you really finding people you can depend on, I imagine, for the success of your business.
100%.
Yeah.
Like, you're only as good as the people that are supporting you. But the one thing that I'm able to do by being sort of the face of Denizens to my client, and them not having to deal directly necessarily with all those subcontractors that I work with, is that I protect them from that element of people not meeting deadlines,
Right.
not being communicative, which is huge. Communication is so key to this industry, and making sure everything gets done on time. And there are people that are just simply not good at that. And it's just who they are. Maybe they're good at their work, but they're not good at communication. So that's something that can easily frustrate a client.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm not. I'm very communicative, and I am very reliable. And that's what my clients like about me. And so I always keep them informed, and they understand that I'm managing the people that are helping bring the project together, but then they only have to deal with one person. And I know what happens sometimes is a client goes to a company because maybe they know the principal designer or the owner, whoever it may be, and they want to work with them, and then their project's too small, and they end up being given another staff member, more junior staff member, to manage their project. And in some cases, if that particular person isn't, as good as the person that they know, it can be a frustration. Whereas with Denizens, you're getting me, you're getting me, and I'm going to handle the other people. And it allows me to sort of be selective in the amount of projects that we take on.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because you mentioned it in that answer, about the typical structure, I guess, in a design firm. Is it typically that there's a partner who is the relationship person? I'm kind of thinking like a law firm, where you have here's your point person that you go to, that is the relationship, and reviews all of the main work and that sort of thing, but isn't necessarily involved in the day-to-day work so much. And then there are junior people who are the ones who are, and they're doing a lot of the work, and it's the partner that reviews it, I guess, and is doing a lot of the meetings. And is that kind of how it works? And I'm just trying to intrigued as to the structure.
Well, it's interesting that you compare it to a law firm, because often interior design as an industry isn't looked at as a profession, but it is a profession, and it is structured
Yeah.
in the way, like, interior design in the realm of like accredited designers who
Right.
are registered, have their license, which I can get into more detail if you'd like. But that type of design firm is very much structured in a similar way to a law firm. You have your principal, maybe have multiple principals, and one is really good at HR, one is good at being a design lead, and the other is good at managing client relationships and going out and getting work. If you have only one principal, maybe they're doing all of that, or they've hired someone to help them with that. And then you've got a team of juniors, intermediate, senior designers running and managing the day-to-day of projects.
Yeah.
So, and in terms of why it's interesting that you compare it to law firms, when I'm speaking about it to people who say, oh, you're an interior designer, oh, that's so fun. And I know they're kind of thinking about decorating. Interior designers' career path really starts with education and going to an accredited school. And then from there, you essentially do like a work study. When you get employed, you're interning with whatever firm you're working at, and you're collecting hours. And once you've reached a certain number of hours, you can write your exams and become licensed and registered. So not far off what lawyers do in terms of writing the bar exam. I'm not saying it's the exact same, but it's very similar to...
I hope it's not the exact same. Yeah.
Similar to the architect's path too. They have to go to school, work for a bit, get their hours, and then also write an exam. So registered interior designers are very much the same type of path. And it's so important that a differentiation is made between decorating or design in the realm of just aesthetics versus registered designers who are dealing with all of that stuff, but we're also dealing with building code, public health and life safety within a building. And that word I said, or sentence I said earlier, knowing when you don't know, and ensuring you bring in the right team, like code consultants, structural engineers, architects, when a project needs those consultants on board to ensure that it's safe for the public, especially in the commercial space, which is where we work. So it's more in depth of a path than most people expect when they hear the word interior designer.
You would think it's someone who very stereotypically you would think, oh, they're good with things that match and picking out the nice furniture and that sort of stuff. It's just this very basic sort of thing of, why do you think people, or who do you think typically gets into, you've obviously met a lot of design related people in your, is there a personality trait or a rough prototype of any kind of people that tend to be and succeed and go into this industry?
No, I think it's a wide variety of personalities and types and traits. I think the ones that are the most successful definitely have it depends. You can have the sort of quiet, introverted, understated person who comes up with the most beautiful designs, and they express and communicate through their drawings and design, as opposed to being more out there. I would say I'm one of those people that's maybe a mix of both. I don't really, for a long time at the beginning of my business, I didn't really put my face on my website or on any of the social media, and was more introverted in the sense of not really wanting attention. But as a person and a human and a friend, I'm known as a very bubbly and outgoing person, and I'm quite friendly with my clients, and just very, not casual, I think that's the wrong word, but I try not to be too serious or professional. Obviously, it's a very serious and professional industry when it comes to life safety. But in terms of when I'm dealing with people, I think people relax much more when you're just kind of more approachable in the way that you talk. And so there's all different types of people that come into the industry, and they succeed for different reasons.
No, I'm always curious as to I don't know, in my industry it was sort of this, because you don't know a lot, right? When you're making the decision as a young person to go into a certain field, you don't have a lot to go on. It can be challenging, right? Like in your teens, you're trying to decide, okay, I should take these high school courses because that means then, if I'm going to go to university, it means I then take this and the path. And you're like, well, what if what if I made the wrong decision, or what if I don't know what I like yet, or I'm curious as to how someone, a young person, say in their teens, decides, hey, yeah, I'm going to go the direction of design. Was there something like, did you know from a young age that you wanted to do something like this, or is it kind of the architecture path or the building, or you really liked, I don't know, designing things, or was there anything that was within you that you thought, hey, this is why I want to go down this path?
Well, I would say that a lot of people, at least the ones that I went to school with, it was a mix. Some people knew from the get-go that this is what they wanted to do, but then there were a lot of people that it was their second
Yeah,
degree
yeah,
in coming into school, and it was kind of they'd gone down a different path, and then decided, oh no, I want to do this. This other path is not for me. For myself, though. Yes, and I'd like to think it's kind of rare. I've always known. I was the kid who my friends would be out, you know, going for dinner in high school or whatever, and I'd say, I can't come. I'm building a table or I'm making something. I would
yeah,
go down to the creek behind my parents' property and collect clay and make clay sculptures. And so I was a very artsy kid from the
right,
get-go. And I was very interested in, how things worked and building things. And through school, I didn't take any high school design courses other than I think I took an AutoCAD course briefly. Um, but in art class, a lot of art stems from architecture. And so we learned a lot about architecture. And I, many people feel, oh, you're an interior designer, a registered interior designer. Was it that you weren't good at math and couldn't get into architecture school? I was a year ahead in math. I was excellent at math. And I did apply to architecture school and I did get in. Um, and right out of high school, I went to Ryerson University. I applied, I got in, but I decided for some reason, I just felt like I was too young.
yeah,
Like
interesting,
this
yeah,
career is very in depth and I need more time. So I went to fine art school and did drawing and painting for 3 years and got a 3-year BA with a specialization in studio arts. And from there, I reapplied to Ryerson and got in again. And so that at that point, I was more of a mature student with all these other people who had come realizing this is what they were meant to do. But I had already known I was going to go to Ryerson eventually. I just wanted to take that time to really enjoy university.
yeah, yeah,
Not to say Ryerson wasn't enjoyable. It's just architecture and design people can relate. It's very intense, a lot of hours. It's very competitive.
right.
And I didn't really have much of a social life during school. So it's something that I don't know how I knew that was going to be the case, but I'm glad that I took that initial path to hone my art skills and a passion I had my entire life, and then go into my career path a little bit older.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So was it? So you said you kind of you at least knew the path that you wanted to go down. Th- throughout your, it sounds like childhood and in your education. Was it then? When you got to the point when you, like, what did it feel like to then finally get a job and be in the industry? And then I guess, did you sort of see yourself as working at a big firm and all that? Like, that traditional path, was that sort of what you had in your mind, and versus owning your own firm when you began and got a job in the industry?
Well, I graduated in 2009, so it was, just in the midst of the financial crisis
Yeah.
that started in 2008, and a lot of my colleagues and friends from school did not get jobs. If I rewind back a little bit to first year, um, most first year students don't get hired at design firms, and in my year there were 100 students and only 2 people got hired on,
Oof.
and
Yeah.
one was me because I was persistent. I did not give up. I had so many no's. so many people who saw my age, because I guess I put that on my resume, and thought, oh, I'm a third year student, great. And then I'd show up and they're like, oh, you're only in first year? Okay, no. And eventually a lovely small boutique like residential firm that also did a little bit of restaurant work hired me. And to this day, I still stay connected with them. I credit them for some of my design sensibility in terms of
Yeah.
detailing and, you know, really thinking through projects. That's something that I learned through the process of working for a smaller company where I had the opportunity to touch on all aspects of a project. Whereas if you graduate and go right into a big firm, usually you're going to be put in the position of just, you're the new guy, you're the junior, you're going to have to, you know, earn your keep, and here's a bunch of drawings that have been marked up and now you need to go correct them, and you're sitting in front of a computer all day, not necessarily getting the experience to go on site and meeting with
Right.
contractors and engineers and whoever. So I'm so grateful for that experience. But residential was never my passion. So they knew that, and they were supportive. And while I looked for a new job, and eventually ended up getting connected with that large 10,000 person company. And that's where I gained a lot of experience in the technical aspects of commercial design, from the process we go through from concept all the way to completion, and you know, studied for my exams and passed my exams while at that company,
Right.
and then moved on to the next architecture firm that, it was 80 people when I started and 250 when I was let go. So yeah, it's
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. No, and then I just sort of wondered. I know, you know, when with my experience. So I was laid off in, when was that? 2010, 2011, 2011, and
same.
it was post. Actually, there was a financial. It was weird. I started in 2007, which, and basically, and in the financial services industry, so it was a tough environment to be in. But you know, I did a good job, and it was we needed juniors, and I was, I guess, cheap amongst other people, so managed to survive. And it was sort of, uh, but when I got to the point of actually then being laid off, it was very insulting in many ways. Where it was ultimately good for me, I think, in a lot of ways. And there was severance, and there was, if you objectively looked at it, I thought, hey, this was a probably a positive experience. But when you look back, you were just, it was kind of this, what do you mean I wasn't good enough? Like, did you have a similar feeling when it happened to you, or was it, did you just say, hey, it was the economy and the firm, and not me? Or I don't know, it's just hard. I just struggled to not take it personally.
Hindsight is 2020. So
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier that, you know, it was just about them taking on too many projects and then laying multiple people off. I mean, when I got laid off, there was 40 other people getting laid off.
Yeah.
So, but at the time, 100% I took it personally. I was young. I
Yeah.
was like, I'm such a good worker, and there's other people here that are not even trying to work hard. But, you know, looking back, I realized those people had been there like 5, 6, 10 years, and their severance was going to be a lot higher. And
Right.
that
Yeah,
was
true that.
the only reason, because it did not make any sense to me. I worked so hard. And I think in both layoffs, it was a mix of just that, like circumstance and, you know, clashes of personalities in some cases, where, you know, real fit is so important. And I think, you know, I fit well with both companies with certain people. But I'm the type of person, if there's even just one bad apple, I'm not going to put up with it.
Right.
And I kind of am the type of person that will fall on the sword, or speak up against anything I feel is not any injustices, I guess I could say. Like I have many fond memories from both companies of great people,
Yeah.
but sometimes there's also bad scenarios that happen, and I'm not one to just like take it without speaking up.
Well, there's an inevitable politics, and it happens just more when the larger the firm, I guess.
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, if you have 10 people in a firm, like you're gonna have as soon as you sort of go up beyond, I think 3 or 4 or 5, you end up with politics, and I guess you can stay away from it. I find, or I've found it to a certain extent, but at the same time, they're still there, and it's hard to get along with everyone, and depending on the role and the situation, what happens there ends up being inequalities and injustices and things that piss you off, and it's hard to for some people anyways, for sure. And I struggle with that as well, of being hey, am I really gonna just am I here just to play this political game and try to say what I should say, or should I say what I really feel like? And yeah, it's interesting. You end up finding yourself in your doing your own thing and doing your own working with your own firm potentially because and it's one of the big perks, I think, of not having to sort of deal with that. You can with you get to deal with whoever you want, which is a cool thing, both from, I guess, a client perspective and a, I guess, more colleague perspective as well, I imagine.
For sure. I've fired clients in the past who, and
Nice.
I mean, that's like a harsh way of putting
Yeah,
it, but some maybe deserved that. If they were becoming sort of abusive or not reasonable in their expectations, it just, like, we only get one life, and
yeah,
some people say, oh, it's money. Well, in the cases where I'd fired clients, magically another project came and basically filled that monetary void. So
right.
I'd rather be happy and less stressed
Yeah.
than continue to work with someone who's not the right fit for me, and maybe I'm not the right fit for them either, and they can benefit from finding someone that's better suited to their expectations. It's not a consistent and common thing. It's only happened maybe once or twice in the 6 years. And most of our clients are repeat clients because we've developed a professional relationship, and there's a trust. They know that I'm going to be reliable and be there for them, and not just think about the design from an ego perspective of what do I want it to look like, and you got to spend the money. It's, what is your budget? How can we get the best bang for your buck and really make this project have some meaning for you as a brand? And in the end, it always looks good too. So
Right.
it's,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you don't have to, there's no trade-off.
Right.
And that's one thing that's quite different too, is that a lot of designers and architects struggle with the like lower budget projects. They'll just say, oh, we can't take that on, or they'll end up taking a client's budget and then just saying, well, they have the money, let's just make
It's
this
just
design
right.
what
I
it should
need,
be.
I need this for my portfolio. It's got to be better than this, or yeah, I know. Yeah, I can see that.
But you know um, I firmly believe that there is a way to create design and have design be accessible at any budget.
Yeah.
And even prior to starting Denizens, my previous company was often put on lower budget projects for whatever reason. And I think it was because I always took those lower budget projects and made them something. And it came to the point where a lot of my projects were winning awards, and some of the bigger budget ones weren't even getting any attention at all.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's, there's something to be said about being able to work with, if you can work with a low budget, you can work with any budget.
Yeah,
Is my
exactly, exactly.
thought.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I think I was going to ask you about just sort of where you drive happiness, and what makes your job and what you do now really sort of fulfilling for you. But I also thought it was interesting, not if people are outside of the design world, to think about the structure that you've created, because I think it is pretty interesting and cool, and can apply to even a lawyer, frankly, or anyone, to really own your own be what you could be in a design firm, but work with outside contractors in a way, because there's a lot of great people, I think, out there that are just on their own doing things that you could partner with, and together tackle projects, again, regardless of the industry that you're in. And I think that the model that you're doing is actually quite interesting and intrigues me in a bunch of ways, because it allows you to collaborate with people that you like working with, and working together to try to tackle projects that are bigger, and maybe there's smaller projects you do by yourself, and can kind of adapt to the situation. But do you so my tie into that and the happiness is just, do you drive a lot of sort of the happiness and that you get from your job sort of on a day-to-day basis in that, and being able to control who you work with and what you do, and the structure of your company?
That was a big part of it,
Yeah.
in being laid off and feeling like there were aspects of the career that I had no control over that were causing me stress. Um, this this way of working was what worked best for me, and I can see this being applied to any industry, really.
Yeah.
You know, as long as you kind of know what you need to do and know where you need to fill in the gaps, I think anyone can work this way. And definitely what you said about taking on projects that are smaller and that I can just sort of like plug away at on my own, while I also have a couple of others that have collaborators in a team. It really allows me to feel like I'm in a larger company without having all of the politics or any of the structural elements of a larger company that didn't agree with me. Um, and one thing that's been really great is I lease space from a architect. Prior to
Yeah.
that, I leased space from a landscape architect, and a lot of my subcontractors have their own offices, or some are even based in other countries or cities. And so having pre-COVID, having people around was nice. I always had someone I could bounce an idea off of, even though they're not necessarily working for me.
Right.
So, my office has 4 architecture and design firms within it, and it feels like a community, even though we're all doing our own thing. And we
Right.
have collaborated a little bit, like in some cases. So it's good on multiple levels. But I definitely, work from home is a big thing right now,
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously. um, but once things settle, I definitely wouldn't make it a permanent thing, just because of the value I've gained from having these colleagues and people around, even just for something as simple as having a lunch break or bouncing a quick idea off of, without having to call one of my collaborators who maybe not be tasked to that project at that particular time. So
Well, what advice, like, say someone, whether they're in the design industry or not, was intrigued by this concept, and I imagine that the biggest thing in their head is going to be, sorry, and I'd say the concept of starting their own firm and working with outside contractors. But I imagine that the reservation is going to be, well, what if I don't have any clients? Or what if something like this happens, COVID-19 happens, and I don't have sort of the job security of a firm or whatever? What would you sort of say to them about starting up, and about the risk, I guess, of that instability, probably, of income, that I think people really just might stress out about if they didn't sort of have it secured in a job?
right, I mean, people get quite used to that consistent paycheck, and
Yeah.
that's really something that is not necessarily the case when you're starting up and running your own business, until you get to a point where it's a bit more steady. And for me, like I said, I was laid off, and then these 3 projects came to me, and that just sort of worked out. But throughout the process, I mean, that was 3 projects. Then I still had to go get more work. And so in the beginning, and as it relates to my industry, I would work with fabricators, doing their shop drawings for them, for just like, here and there, to fill in the gaps of more major projects.
Yeah.
And also from doing that, gained connections within my industry to then get clients. So thinking outside of the box of like, oh, I have to start this business and I have to right away have 10 clients and away I go. Like, that's not a realistic way to look at it. Just trying to find, a couple of good clients if you can, and then filling in the gaps with the sort of other work that's maybe related or maybe not. I used to drive my best friend around as an Uber. Like, I'm not actually Uber, but I,
Right. Yeah.
just because I needed to pay my bills. And I had other friends who worked in events, and I would go and help her with events from time to time. Or I had another friend who owns a food truck, and I would go and work on his food truck. And I did whatever it took to build my base and not give up. Because if you just expect to have your projects and you don't get them and then you give up, maybe you're missing out on what could be. So instead of worrying about having all of those projects, I made sure I had money to survive by having all these fill-in types of tasks.
Right.
And then, and then eventually the work came.
Poised and ready for when when you actually get the work, because it does take time. I mean, it does. You can't just expect them to start rolling it. Oh, she started her own firm. Okay, everyone's gonna flock. Like, it's just you have to be there for a while, and you have to have a bit of an established. You got to make the video, and you've got to make the website, and you've got to do all the things to kind of get out there. And then you just kind of have to sit for a bit and make it sort of work. But you can't necessarily expect to have the clients rolling in right from day one. But if you're, I think, willing to hold it out and building in some buffers there in your life where you don't absolutely need that steady income right from day one, then I think you have the chance. I think there's a certain amount of just, I guess, believing in yourself that you need to hold it out. But I think that's why I sort of look at your story and saying, hey, this is a one of like, hey, don't give up in it, because there is a way. And I think you could end up potentially in some place that's so much better than where you thought you really wanted to be, and it's something that you sort of built yourself. So I think that's what makes it really cool.
Yeah, I mean, when I was laid off that second time, at first I was like, oh, I'm free from the stress that this place was causing me. But then I went into this mode of, do I belong in this industry? Like, is there a reason why I'm continuously getting laid off? Am I just not the right personality type?
Yeah.
Am I not good at collaborating and working with others? All of these things came to mind. And then I thought about it, and, like, tried different things, traveled, and I just kept coming back to design. And then these projects came my way, and, it kind of found me again, and I found myself within design again, and realized, no, it wasn't about me. It was just about not being the right fit for those scenarios. And now I'm able to sort of forge my own path and make my own way. And I'm happy doing it this way. And it's not about the industry. It's just about how I'm doing it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Great. Well, I really appreciate you having the conversation with me today. How, if someone is intrigued by, they want to see your stuff, or they want to get in contact with you, what is the best way?
Well, there's probably the two best ways would be to check out our website. You can check out the video that you've mentioned a couple times, and it's www.denizens.ca. Instagram is probably a place where we're most active in terms of social media.
Right.
And so it's just at Denizens of Design. I'm sure you'll type it all out in the
I will put it in
podcast notes.
Exactly. So you don't have to remember all that. Absolutely. I'll make it easy for you. But yeah, that's all super helpful. And yeah, I will link as well to the site of the person that made the video, Kelsey. It was a good one. So yeah, thanks again for joining. And I knew nothing about the design industry, but now have a much better appreciation for it. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Greg. It's been great to talk to you today. And yeah, glad I could give you some insights into the fun world of interior design.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. Take care.
So there you have it. Sharing the stories that you probably don't always hear or aren't always comfortable telling, but Dyonne was great because she, right from the get-go, was very open about it. Like I mentioned in the interview, she does it in this video that she has right on her website where she talks about being laid off and then saying, hey, how can we do this better? This sucks. There should be a better way. And so she kind of created it herself. So it's really really cool, and I hope you enjoyed that interview. It was nice to see, and I'm gonna put some links in the show notes on the website lifetimeatwork.com where you can follow up and see some of her designs. It's actually really cool to follow someone like that who you kind of know and have an in on Instagram, because there's so many cool pictures that you get to see from some of the stuff that she's done in the past. So thanks again so much for listening to the podcast. I got a bunch more really cool ones in the hopper coming soon. So please subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're on, and you'll definitely not miss them. So thanks again for listening, and until next time, don't worry, be happy.